Well, all right, all right, all right. We are here at the end of one of the most exciting HR events, honestly, I have ever had the great privilege to participate in. I hope that many of you were able to join a lot of our sessions here today. And no, I'm not Matthew McConaughey. I'm Mary Ann Spatola and delighted to be your moderator for this last panel of the day, a sense of belonging, building HR communities. And we're going to talk to three powerhouse HR influencers who have each created their own HR community, talk to us a little bit about their journey along the way, and get to know what their groups are all about. So I'm excited to be here with them. So I'm going to start it off and let our panelists introduce themselves just a little bit. I'm going to ask them to answer this question about their own HR community that they've created. So I'm going to start with Tina Marie Woolfield, who hails from Motor City in Detroit, Michigan. So grateful to have you with us today, Tina. Tina Marie.
Definitely very glad to be here. And I am the co-founder of an HR networking group called HR Unite. We are a group that believes in advancing the HR profession through professional and powerful connections. We have been around since 2017 and are now in several states, and we get together through intimate conversations. We call them HR coffee talkies, so it's coffee therapy. Small intimate groups that get together once a month and share, network, and collaborate on HR issues. And then for those that kind of like the evening vibe, we have happy hours. Get it? Happy HR, where collaborative professionals get together and again have genuine and authentic conversations with each other. It's a great community. We keep growing, and I think we're better together.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina Marie. And Eric Hershot, hailing from Chicago. He is the founder of HR Hotseat. Tell us a little bit about your community and what's your differentiator.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for so long, Mary Ann. I'm thrilled to be here. I have Harmony Insights is my company. I primarily do DISC, help companies and consultants leverage DISC with their employees and their consultants, or with their clients rather. A few years ago, I started HR Hotseat. It is an inclusive mastermind community based in a mastermind style conversation.
Awesome.
Something that's been discussed for decades now. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich talked about it early on, and it's been popular among entrepreneurs and small business owners, even CEOs, but not so much in the HR space. And I thought, well, if I could bring 10 or 12 people together for a HR-focused conversation, you know, it might help me build relationships with these people. And over 3 years, it's grown into almost 2,000 members in 6 different licensed chapters around the country.
That is awesome. Congratulations. What a great success story. And last but not least, we have the iconic, infamous, one and only Enrique Rubio, who started this incredible global movement that we call Hacking HR. So Enrique, tell us a little bit about what differentiates Hacking HR from other HR communities.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Ann. And I think Hacking HR started as a community talking about technology, future of work, and HR. I mean, we have evolved to becoming more of a more comprehensive community, talking about more general things related to HR and non-HR, but that affect HR. And I think perhaps one of the things that it's the key component of our community is perhaps 2 things, actually. Number one, it is that we are an open community that doesn't charge a fee membership or a membership for to its members. We allow people to just come in as they want. We are an open community. We have chapters all around the world, and our chapters have a very unique way of organizing, and it's not an original way of organizing. It's a self-organizing principle, but we allow the chapters to design their own learning agenda, the format for their events, the frequency of their events, the speakers that they want to invite, because the reality for each city is very different from another cities. For example, we were talking about Detroit before, and Detroit has a very different reality than Chicago, for example, or DC or New York. So for each of our communities, perhaps the learning agenda has to be different. Even though we are connected in the back end by different topics and different things, I think there are realities in each community that need to be discussed, and that's what we're doing with Hacking HR. So we are creating all these chapters talking about future of work, technology, the future of organizations, people, and HR. And we are a self-organized community and a non-membership fee-based kind of organization.
That's right. Thank you for that. And I will tell you personally, one of the reasons I was so thrilled to be on this panel in particular and moderate it is because I had the great fortune just about 2 years ago to cross paths with Enrique here in New York City. We met for a coffee and we had all of those conversations he just mentioned. And I felt like we were kindred spirits. I couldn't wait to get involved in his organization. It's been an incredible ride ever since. And
the landline is ringing. What's funny about Marianne is that Marianne was she was a speaker, and her first event that she spoke at was the event in Chicago. We didn't meet you in there, Eric, but that was her first event. So April 10th, 2018. Yes, last year.
You couldn't have made up that timing if you wanted to. My apologies.
That's all right.
A landline. I hate
how we roll.
Talk about old technology. So let me just finish my thought, and then we're going to go to the first question. So I met Enrique Rubio in the city, got involved. It has been one of the most transformational experiences from my professional and personal career. And we'll talk about, what's important about these communities and what you can do to get involved. But we will move now to a question I have for the group about why is this topic important now? What is so important about this HR community sense of belonging, need for collaboration? Why is it so important to you now? Eric, how about you?
It's funny. I was on the phone with a guy named Ben Joya, who's an author and a leadership speaker out on the West Coast. And he was looking through my LinkedIn profile, and he saw something I have written there that says more or less, I believe that HR professionals deserve a supportive, uplifting community of their own. And that took him by such surprise. He said, how TED Talks talk about ideas worth sharing? I think that's an idea worth sharing. Which was so funny to hear from somebody else, because I don't want to say I take it for granted, but I take it as a given that HR professionals need community. And I think especially when we're discussing conversations like this, where we're talking about the future of work, and so many great discussions today about change and change management and agile and all sorts of things, that I think that people need a foundation. They need to be centered and grounded in individual and group values. What is it that we value? What do we need from each other? What can we count on maybe as we move forward and we consider what the future of work might look like? And awesome. I wouldn't say that there's anything about community itself that is terribly innovative, but I think especially within the context of a changing workplace, finding your tribe, surrounding yourself intentionally by people who share your values and aspirations couldn't be more valuable.
Yeah, I like that. I really couldn't agree more. And I love that term, or who's your tribe? We talk about that a lot. And then Tina Marie, for you, I remember when we first met and we were talking about this panel, you were describing those coffee talkies as these small, intimate groups, and kind of pulling on Eric's thread there, a way for people to come together and go deep and share and have this community of trust that they can be vulnerable and learn from each other. Tell us a little bit more about that for you.
So I think when you look at HR, we tend to get siloed and get so absorbed of what's going on in our organization that we lose sight of what's going on outside, and we feel isolated and alone. So the beauty of Coffee Talkies, our HR Unite HR Coffee Talkies, is that it's organic collaboration. There's no set format. We get together and we talk about what's going on in our lives at that moment. And sometimes we can have a conversation that we want to fire the CEO with those internally. Or if we're dealing with something, we think it's just us, and you go into that sense of me too. And I don't mean from the harassment perspective, I mean that what their experience is not unique to what other others are experiencing in the HR profession and in the workplace as a whole. So kind of piggybacking on what Eric said, I believe in the abundance mentality. And I think that as we as HR professionals, we get so absorbed with helping others, we forget to help ourselves. And if we don't help ourselves and collaborate and come together as a community and learn from each other, or have somebody share honest feedback and dialogue, we can't continue to move the needle of change is what's been shared throughout this entire day in this forum. So that's where I think when we look at those small, intimate conversations, it's having the feeling like you have a voice and you're not lost in a crowd, but you're part of that conversation, part of that dialogue, which then allows you to be part of the solution.
Awesome. And for you, Enrique, why now?
Well, you know, I always, when people ask me about hacking HR, I always say that the nature of the challenges that we're dealing with today in this new world of work is just so complex and so overwhelming that it's just impossible for any single HR function within any given company or any single country, city, you know, even region to cope with these challenges. And actually, this morning I was speaking about this online in a conference in Vienna, and I showed this data point by McKinsey last year, released this report saying that anywhere between 375 and 800 million people could lose their jobs to technology over the next 12 years. So that's more people than people that live in the US, right? So those kind of things won't be able to be resolved by a single country. We need more, I always say that we need more togetherness in order to get our heads together for collective kind of intelligence in order to resolve these very, very complex challenges. And to me, the only way to do that is by the power of communities, getting us together, getting our brains together, getting our heads together to brainstorm on how to solve these problems, to find out opportunities together. And as Tina Marie said before, it's coming from an abundance mentality. And that's one thing that I think generally HR has. We come from an abundance mentality, and now we have to leverage on that to get people together in communities in order to find ways to, as humanity, to not only survive these chaotic times of transformation, but to thrive together. And again, as I said before, I think the only way to achieve that is through the power of communities.
Absolutely. And I think all the folks who are tuned into this panel are echoing those thoughts. So we're seeing comments about find your vibe, find your tribe. We're seeing comments that's no one can do the 20-mile march alone. Thanks, Paul. Absolutely agree. Find your fuel for the journey. So there's a lot of support, I think, we're hearing in this group about finding that community, finding your sense of purpose, finding your HR peeps that you can collaborate with and share ideas. So clearly, we have a bunch of raving fans on the community for our panel. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are your members, what's on their minds? What are the topics that come up when you guys come together? What are the raving fans of your communities talking about? Tina Marie?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Enrique.
I was just going to say that one thing that I've observed is that, and we continue to talk about in Hacking HR, is that there are sort of two big buckets of knowledge, that are important for HR today. The bucket of knowledge that is the traditional bucket of knowledge for HR. That includes policy, compliance, compensation, maybe some recruitment and whatnot. So that is within the traditional HR framework of operation, our traditional capabilities. But there's another bucket of knowledge that is not traditional, it's unconventional for HR. And that includes design thinking, agility, innovation, digital transformation, the impact of disruptive technologies. And one trend that I've seen in the HR, at least in the Hacking HR community, is that people in HR are very interested in learning from this new bucket of knowledge. So maybe there's no one specific question, but they want to learn more about design thinking. They want to learn more about agility. They want to learn more about digital transformation, because they know that what we have been doing so far in the traditional space or capabilities of HR is not enough anymore. We need more than that. And that's the trend that I'm seeing. What's in people's minds is, how do we learn of all these new things that are important for me as an HR professional to do my work and to deliver way more value than I have been delivering so far. So that's one of the things that I've seen so far, at least within the Hacking HR community.
Yeah, that ties into what Jean Meister talked about in the first panel this morning. She said this quote just kind of really struck me. we have never moved this fast, and we will never move this slow again. And so I think that's what resonates with a lot of our HR community, trying to come together and figure that out. How do we keep pace? How do we bring the right changes? Excellent. How about you, Eric?
I'm going to add a Jean Meister quote, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
I wrote down one as well. She talked about dialogue can't just be HR. It needs to include diverse and divergent perspectives. And, you know, in the beginning, I will say, when I was starting HR Hotseat, I was very protective of practitioners, you know, and there was this opportunity to allow in service providers and students and folks in job transition. And I got nervous. And I realized that to be a community that's truly founded on inclusion, we had to break down those silos, and we had to welcome anybody who wanted to take part in an HR focused conversation. And it turns out that our dialogue has been so much more robust and rewarding as a result. You know, we will have HR practitioners that show up and say, you know, look, there's a lot of new stuff to talk about, but there's a lot of traditional stuff that I want to discuss too. I'm a department of one. You know, I don't have a mentor within my company. I don't have leadership that's necessarily supportive of the HR function. How do you even launch a learning and development initiative? You know, I'm thrilled to see so many members of our community chiming in online. And they're these, as I see some of these names come through, I think of the hot seat topics that we've had where people say, you know what, I don't have my own sounding board internally. Can we return to some of these conversations we've had in the past, but have them now in a way that's safe and confidential and productive, where I know how what we discuss is immediately applicable. So rather than repeating a lot of what I've heard Enrique say already, I'll just say that I think at a time when so many organizations and associations are focused on innovative content, and rightfully so, you know, if that's what they've made their name on, I think that there is such an opportunity now for a different context. And quite often that's what I tell people. It's not rocket science what we do. We're often just allowing people to have the conversation they've always wanted to have in the environment, the safe, confidential environment they've always wanted to have it. And that alone is enough to, I think, serve people up with what they've been craving.
That's awesome. We've got a great comment from Brooke, and she's talking about, kind of to your point, Eric, about letting others in. And I know in our New Jersey group, we've had tech startups, we've had business people. They're not just HR practitioners, but what she's talking about is engaging with others who are so-called HR haters, who don't see the value we bring or haven't had that experience of working with a strategic HR partner that can add value to a business. I'm just curious, Tina, have you come across any of those?
Well, yes, absolutely. So I think part of the differentiation from the HR Unite perspective is we are very inclusive. There's individuals that are trying to break into HR and they can't, so they go and they get their 4-year degree. They don't know how to get in. We have a lot of individuals who are in transition through no fault of their own, right? It's a business decision happen, things occur, and we find ourselves either out of a job for a good reason or by no fault of our own. But a lot of individuals, I think, as Eric was mentioning, more about the service providers. We will allow service providers in if they want to be a part of the conversation. But the one thing that I will say that I hold true within the HR Unite community is it is a non-sales solicitation environment. So if I'm in a room and I have somebody from a payroll provider or a benefits broker, or whatever it is, they're not going to sell with me. We're going to have an honest, genuine conversation. And I think that's really important, that holds the integrity of the group and that safe, trusted environment to the group. And that allows that inclusion, that sense of community, and that sense of, if I know Marianne I can go to her for a question, or she's going to be there, it's going to be non-judgmental, and she's going to be like, yes, how can I help? And that's how it's become this ripple effect of what's become this dynamic, I'm going to use the word movement because Eric started a movement and Enrique started this movement, but a movement didn't start with just us. The community doesn't belong to Eric or myself or Enrique. The community belongs to all of us. And what makes it so different and amazing is every single one of us that are a part of it. So hopefully that answered your question. If I went off on a diversion, I was going back to your original one, but
beautiful.
I think it's really important for us to all just kind of sit back and just realize that, I think somebody said in your comments, we are better with our voice, with one voice, one band, one sound. It's the same in our profession, that we can help move and engage and have action by working together and not working against each other.
Yeah.
Let me add,
I want
if you don't,
to pick. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
No,
I was just going to add simply that, playing on what Tina Marie was saying, that the way that I put it in my community is, if you show up with a heart of education and of service, regardless of what demographic bucket you fall into, you're going to be welcome here. And then the people who show up and they're a little bit more commercial in their approach, I don't even have to say anything. It's the group recognizes that, picks up on it very quickly, and it changes the tenor of the conversation, such that that person says, well, you know what, if I can't convert overnight, a number of these people into paying clients, I'm not going to return. Well, that's fine, because that's not the approach that we're looking for anyway.
That's right. There's a lot of nice comments for you, Tina. Beautifully said. So a lot of fans.
Thank you.
I loved most your comment about, this is our community. It's not owned by any one individual, and there's lots of ways we can all get involved, and there's lots of communities to join. But the three of you had an idea and took a risk and put it out there to give it a go. And I'd be curious to hear, because a lot of our listeners maybe are thinking about joining a particular community, and that's great. We'd love them to do that. But if we have listeners who are thinking about, well, maybe I want to do that someday, or I have an idea I've been thinking about, but I'm not sure what to do. I'm curious if you would mind sharing some of your successes as you got started, and maybe some of the challenges you came across as you started your group. Eric, would you go first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. As I mentioned, I think in my prologue, I only intended for 10 or 12 HR professionals. Surprise. And now we're up to almost 2,000 in 6 different chapters. It took on a life of its own. So I had to decide, is this something that I want to grow with? People will come up to me and they're very flattering after events, and they'll say, you must be very proud of what you built. And I'll say, I appreciate you saying that, but I feel like it's building itself. It really, to Tina Marie's point, does belong to the community. Right off the bat, I knew that people were going to crave that peer-focused, peer-oriented dialogue. You can go anywhere to hear from a panel. There are organizations that are doing panels really well, and other subject matter experts. And I wanted to do something a little bit different and bring people together for peer-focused dialogue. And I knew that was going to work, and it did. I had no idea that so many people, my guess is that people were going to show up to sit in the hot seat, to be the one that says, look, I have a workplace challenge. I could really use feedback from my peers. Certainly we had that interest. By and large, people are showing up because they want to be of service to other people. That you can go anywhere else to soak up information and learn, but it's rare that you can be a part of a larger conversation where you are also giving back and you are teaching other people. That was one big lesson. And the other is really just remaining open and receptive to wherever inspiration and value is going to come. Had I closed the door on demographics beyond HR practitioners early on, the community would not have flourished in the way that it has. And to really open up the doors and be truly inclusive, I think, was something that, honestly, a learning lesson for me along the way that I had to experience for myself.
Good for you. How about you, Tina Marie?
So HR Unite was an idea that happened. My co-founder, Christy, said, hey, let's get people together for a happy hour. We took a picture, threw it on LinkedIn, and 7,000 views happened. And we thought it was a fluke. And so we did it again, and 25 people showed up. And it was just this, it truly grew organically. I, like Eric, never thought that this would become what it is. And now I'm in Michigan and Ohio, and we're continuing to grow. And I think it's that drive to belong, that drive that people have, that they're part of a conversation. It's this need that, again, people will come up to me and say, well, I followed you on LinkedIn and I heard about this group. How do I join? And it totally just blows my mind that it's become what it has. And for me, I think the biggest thing I can say I learned through this process is if somebody says, hey, let's get together, I just merely am a conduit. I'll give them the opportunity and I'll allow them to take that forum and make it their own. But I could not do this without Friends of HR Unite, and that's what we really call our extended members of the community. And they come in and sometimes help us with events. They offer their help, and they just want to be in the room to be a part of our community. And like Eric, if I had put my foot down and said no sales solicitation means no vendors, it wouldn't have became what it's become today. So inclusion means accepting all perspectives, not just our own, and that's what allows the conversation to truly be honest, authentic, and genuine.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina Marie. And how about you, Enrique?
Well, if somebody wants to start a community, I think it's all about, making it happen, and one thing that this happens to people in general, but I think it especially happens to people in HR, is that we always get deterred by, some kind of fear of doing something, either judgment or criticism or something, and I think we have to just get rid of that kind of fear, or just keep it in there, but overcome it and just say, I'm going to make this happen because I want to test it out. I want to see if it works, and it's giving me joy. It's bringing me joy, and I just want to make it happen. So I think to me, it's about, if somebody wants to create a community of either HR or anything else, it's just making it happen. Start small so that you don't try to manage your own expectations. If you start small, now you make it happen, then you will be learning a lot. And, we had the first event in Hacking HR that was in September of 2017. So it's almost 2 years since we created Hacking HR. And, I put together this event in Washington, D.C., which is where I live right now. And my idea was this was an event that is only going to be in D.C. I never expected it to be anything else other than D.C. And it's grown to, we have, almost 4,000 people sign up for the event today, right? So, I never expected this to happen. Like the same stories of Eric and Tina Marie. So I think it's just about making it happen. And the lesson learned that goes along the way is that we have to be very patient with, because once it's not an experiment anymore, at the beginning you are like, well, my mindset is this is going to be an experiment. So whatever happens, happens. But once you see that things are working well, then you start creating all these expectations, right? So you want to have an event where you bring 1,000 people, but only 100 sign up. Or maybe you want to do 200 events in 1 year, but you can only do 20. So you have to be patient, and you have to be, take care of yourself in the sense of like, things not always happen at the pace you want them to happen. There always will be people, some people, the majority of them will celebrate what you're doing. Some others won't like what you're doing. I remember when I put together the first Hacking HR session, I invited a speaker, and the very first thing that he said when I spoke to him on the phone, he didn't even say hello. The very first thing he said was, why hacking HR? We don't need to hack everything in HR. And I'm like, wow, I don't think I want you as a speaker for my event, because, we're talking about transforming HR. We find people like that, right? That they are used to some ways of operating. They are very comfortable in their comfort zone. So, so it's like make things happen, but also manage your expectations and be okay with failing, with, judgments, criticisms, because that's part of what's going to happen as you make awesome things happen. So that's my main, perhaps, learning experience so far with Hacking HR.
Terrific. Awesome. Thank you all for sharing your ideas. The other thing that I think we all share as a common philosophy and kind of fundamental operating principle is this whole notion of pay it forward, right? It's about helping each other and helping somebody else in our community to learn and grow, collaborate, share ideas. And each of you are pioneers, innovators in your own right. I'm curious to hear a little bit about who are those mentors that have influenced your thinking? Who do you follow? What is it about them that really resonates with you? Give us some inspiration for the rest of the group. Enrique?
I love Gary Vee. Gary Vee. I love Michelle Obama. They both talk about making things happen. If you follow Michelle Obama on Instagram, which is the way I follow her, and Gary Vee basically everywhere, because it's everywhere. Gary Vee said something like 2 or 3 years ago that at that moment I said, like, I don't agree with this. He said, it's all about execution. Because if you have an idea, but you keep it in your mind, somebody else is going to do it for you because there are no original ideas anymore. Somebody has already done, or somebody's thinking about what you have in mind. But maybe the difference, not maybe, actually the difference is between making those things happen. So he said, if you're afraid of people stealing your ideas, somebody will make it happen for you. So he said this like 3 or 4 years ago, the first time that I heard him. And I was like, I don't agree with that. I think it's all about creating stuff in your mind and then making them happen. But then I realized that, yes, it's in about executing what you have in mind. Like, for example, I'm putting together this, what I hope becomes the signature event for Hacking HR for March of next year. There are a number of things that I want to do for that event. It's a 3-day conference, and I will talk a little bit about that at the end of the session. But there are many things that I want to do in that conference that I have no idea how to do, but I'm still going to try to do them because it's all about in the learning and the execution. And you will never learn if you don't put those things out there and you try to do them. So Gary Vee has been very influential to me in that sense, and Michelle Obama, because she's always, both from making things happen, but always keeping the human and the person in mind. That is your end goal, how we are, the people that we are serving. So those two are the most, perhaps, influential people that I can think about the work that I'm doing right now with Hacking HR.
Awesome. How about you, Tina Marie?
So there's 2 people that immediately come to mind. One is Davin Silvano. Davin is one of the co-founders of Purpose Point and has a Leading and Living with Purpose conference. There's going to be one in LA. He did the inaugural one here in Detroit. He is somebody that is kind of taking that find your purpose, find your passion, build your community around it. Just an amazing individual. And he's here in Detroit, so he's part of our HR Unite community. So I'm very fortunate to be able to interact with him outside of following him online.
That's
the other
awesome.
individual, his name is Tony Moore. Tony is, I call him the culture Jedi, but he wrote a book called Culture in 4D. Tony talks about when there's a hole in the sidewalk, how sometimes when we, in complacency, will keep falling in the hole until we wake up and find a way around it.
Yep.
And I think in HR, we're finding a way around it through forums like this. And so those are 2 individuals, again, Davin Silvano, Purpose Point, and Tony Moore, that highly recommend and have been an influence with me personally.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Eric, how about you?
This is an important question to me because masterminds are based in the idea that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, as has been said. And so if the more intentional you are, and I don't know if we've used that word yet, but the more intentional you are about who those people are, it doesn't have to be 5, but the people with whom you're spending the most time, the more valuable, et cetera, that time is and those influences are. And it's going to sound like I'm saying this for points, and I'm not. The leader of this community, Enrique Rubio, has been very inspiring to me. And
Yeah.
I'm only now getting to know Tina Marie's group, and I can't wait to talk with her more about what she's doing with HR Unite. And I know she'll be in this group shortly, and already is, in terms of the people who are inspiring me by the work that she's doing. Enrique, with what he's accomplished with this group, Jennifer McClure with Disrupt HR. These are people that if I send an email or pick up the phone and say, I could really use your help. I'm trying to do something with HR Hotseat that I haven't done, don't know how to do. I'm thinking you may have been down this road, or if you haven't, that you may have some unique perspective on this challenge. Without asking a question, they will clear their calendar and I'll have a half an hour of their time. And you don't often get that with the people that you admire most and the people who are most influential in terms of what you're trying to do. Part 2 that I want to say to that, and I hope that the impact of this is being felt by our viewers today. The fact that we would even get on this call to begin with, at a time when I think that there's so much competition out there, the fact that we can get on, see each other as collaborators, as fellow thought leaders, and say, we have no qualms sharing what's worked, what hasn't worked, being vulnerable, being proud of our successes, because we don't see each other as competition. And when I see a lot of the comments that are coming up, including from people from the HR Hotseat community, I see people who are members of ours that are running the local Disrupt HR chapter here in Chicago, that are running the local SHRM chapters, who are making things happen in their own right, but come together with others because they see the value of collaboration, community, and inspiration. The very fact that I can get on a call like this with people who inspire me and very honestly say that I'm taking my inspiration from them, among others, is, I think, one of the most special things that can come out of this particular conversation for me personally.
That is awesome.
I want to add something to that, Marianne, and well, Eric, thank you so much for the kudos. I really appreciate it. You have been very inspiring to me as well. You know, I'm glad that we connected, almost a couple of years ago. And, I want to like backtrack a little bit to the concept of this abundance mentality that I think we all have. And I just quantify that. And this is how I quantify it. There are 12 million people who work in HR around the world. I don't think that all the events that we're doing all around the world are reaching to more than 200,000 of them. I don't think we're reaching 200,000 people in HR in the world. So if you think about it, 200,000 people in HR out of 12 million people, that is only 2%. So even if, we have so much work to do. This is the way I see it. We have so much work to do. And even if we didn't have the abundance mentality, this would be such a big chunk, the majority of the chunk of the marketplace in HR that needs to be served by the things that we're doing, and it's not being served today. We're talking about millions of people around the world. So, like going back to your idea of building community and this abundance mentality, we have a lot of work to do, and I'm happy that we're able to connect in this way because we see the opportunities for everybody and not just for one group. With Jennifer is the same thing, and many other folks in HR that are doing amazing work with the HR Tech Conference in Las Vegas, the people that are doing Unleash, the people that are doing the HR Transform in Las Vegas as well, and many other communities, people that are doing amazing work to bring HR up to speed. So all of them, thankfully, think with an abundance mentality.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for adding that. And I totally agree with that, Enrique. And I think there's more space to continue to expand and do more different, diverse types of communities that help us all learn and continue to grow globally across the world. And the other thing I would say about this, that I love about this discussion today, is if you were on any of the other panels throughout the day, what we're really talking about here within our own HR communities and building this sense of belonging, purpose, collaboration, and sharing is everything we've been talking about that we need to do as HR professionals. Co-create, be agile, be thinking about our customers in front of us, our other HR communities, the other functional areas we need to work with, and invite them in. Let them be part of the conversation. Even if we don't all agree, we can learn from each other and make ourselves that much better. So with that, I'm going to go to the last question of the day, which is just about that. I wondered if you would each share a resource, a tip, a recommendation that can help our audience move to action, whether it's getting involved with another community. The folks who are putting comments in on the panel here are talking a lot about the different ways we can create HR communities. It's not always the meetup personally. Maybe it's an online group. There's other ways to share and learn from each other. So I'd love to have a recommendation from each of you to help our listeners really move to doing something, taking action, like Enrique said. It's all about execution. Where do we go from here? Tina Marie, would you start us?
Sure. I think it just starts with the courage to take a step. And that step could be in a social media forum like LinkedIn, comment on somebody you're following, or find someone that you connect with and take that message. Dennis Mosley Williams, a big fan of his, he's another influencer, talks about your fans. Be a fan. And when you are a fan, you'll share that message with somebody else, and it's like a ripple, and it'll continue to bring you into the community in whatever form that takes. So you could start small with using your voice there, or start with your local SHRM chapter or a professional community. There's women's groups within Forum. There's a lot of different ways that you can find your community, whatever it looks like. But it starts small with a courage to speak up. And then from there, you'll find your tribe.
Reach out. Excellent. Great advice. How about you, Eric?
I think a community of 2,000 members starts with 5.
I am missing you both.
I'm going to return to what I was saying earlier about being intentional about who those 5 people are. And, you know, you can selfishly, I would love to have people check us out and see what we're doing, because I know how committed we are to those communities that we are running. But if people did little more than give some thought to who are the 5 people that they spend the most time with, and they're intentional about those relationships, I think that's a great start. If you want to take a step further, find a community that's already in place. And I used to say, get involved to the extent that it is convenient / valuable for you.
Right.
And then over time, I realized that those aren't always going to be the same thing, that the most valuable commitment that you could make to yourself and to an organization, the most valuable might not necessarily be the most convenient. It might mean, you know, becoming part of a committee that requires more of your time, or as a self-described introvert, putting yourself into social settings that are maybe less comfortable for you. Maybe not as convenient as it could be, but pushing yourself in that way could be the most valuable effort that you could make.
Yep, increasing your capacity to add more value. Love it. And then I'm going to add my 2 cents before we turn it over to Enrique. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier was this has been one of the most transformational growth experiences I've had personally and professionally, being part of the Hacking HR community. I had the great good fortune of also coming across Matt Burns, who was on an earlier panel today. And one of the discussions we had early on, he invited me to do a Zoom chat just to network and get to know each other, because we had a great initial exchange at one of the events. And we talked a lot about this notion of how to use your LinkedIn community. And I had previously been in this camp of, oh, I have to know everybody in my network. I'm not sure who they are. I don't know what they're about, you know, all that kind of protective, guarded kind of approach. And Matt challenged me and he said, so what are you afraid of? And I stopped and I said, good question. What am I afraid of? Because it's easy to disconnect if it doesn't work out, right? So I really shifted my approach and I followed Matt's recommendation, and I began connecting with a host of people all around the world. I began doing those half-hour Zoom talks just to get to know people and what's going on in their world and what are they working on and what's important to them. And I will tell you that my LinkedIn feed is so dramatically different than it was 2 years ago when I started this because of that. I'm now connected to people all across the globe and get to see what's going on in their world. And yes, did I come across some folks who I immediately disconnect from? If you're just trying to pitch me, because that's why you want to connect, that's not what I'm about. And it's easy to just behind the scenes, remove the connection, thanks very much. Don't need to make a muss or fuss about it. That's just my personal view. But I have almost tripled my connections on LinkedIn. And it is a phenomenal way to build that sense of community and expand your thinking. So I'm going to turn it to Enrique to offer his last closing comments on recommendations for our audience. And then Enrique is going to close out not only this session, but the event for the day. Enrique?
My recommendation is just put yourself out there. You know, I see how many people, very, very talented people, preventing the world from enjoying who they are or from enjoying the beauty and the light that they can bring to the world because they are afraid of what could happen, right? What could happen if I put myself out there on LinkedIn? You know, what people are going to say about this? What could happen if I go to my job and I apply for that job? What could happen if I just, you know, quit my job and I decide to be independent, you know, a self-employed kind of person? So I think it's all about putting yourself out there. There are many, many rewards with this. Of course, there are always risks associated with it, but I always encourage people to just put themselves out there, whether it is on social media, by creating videos on LinkedIn, by, you know, HR. At the end of the day, one of the core new capabilities of HR is marketing. So if we cannot put ourselves out there, creating videos on LinkedIn, just writing up stuff, commenting on other people's things, networking with others. It's going to be very complicated for us to do our job because we are always in the front line between the organization and internal employees, but also potential employees, right? So, we become marketers at the end of the day. And to do that, you got to put yourself out there, sort of swinging a little bit the risk associated with it, but also getting ready to reap all the fantastic benefits that could come if you put yourself out there. So that's exactly what we're doing with this conference. We are a bunch of people here putting ourselves out there to the world to get comments, feedback, reactions. Some people agree with what we're saying, some people disagree with what we're saying, but that's ultimately what helps us grow, right?